Well, I'm here with Tammy Peterson. We are going to have a fun conversation. You've been on the podcast before. Last time we talked about a bunch of different stuff. We talked about the carnivore diet. We talked about parenting. We talked a little bit about Catholicism and Protestantism. But today, I thought it'd be fun to have a conversation about beauty, art, the culture. And I'm sure it'll go all over the place because you have a lot of really good things to say. When we did the last podcast, my wife and I listened to it several times, and you said some things about parenting that were really helpful because we've got a 2.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, and we've implemented some of the strategies that you've given, and it works. And so, anyways, we can talk about.
I want to hear a little bit about that.
Yes, we will. Well, we'll talk about that in a bit, but I want to start. So you live in the United States now, right? And you used to live in Canada. And since it's Memorial Day, I thought we could start with a conversation about what it's like living in the United States compared to in Canada. Or have you enjoyed your time here?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you guys for all coming. Yeah. So I lived in America once before. Jordan was a professor at Harvard. Mm-hmm. And so we moved there in 93 and moved back to Canada in 98. Mm-hmm. And most of the reason we moved back to Canada was because all our relatives were there and we had little children and we wanted them to know their grandparents. And it was easier for us to send them on a plane and not cross the border. So we went back to Canada. It wasn't that we didn't like Boston. We were in Boston under Clinton, and that was, United States economy was doing very well at that time. So Harvard was doing very well at that time. You know, there was the bureaucracy of the university was still in its place. It hadn't taken over everything. And so the professors were still they were able to get together and to tell each other what they were thinking about. And they weren't impeded by the bureaucracy. They were allowed to tell the truth. Yeah. And so it was a good time. And then we went back to Toronto and we raised our children there. As a Westerner, I'm from Alberta, really, which is directly above Arizona. So this dry climate is very, very much in keeping with where both of us grew up. And so we do really like that about being here, but we didn't come here because of that. Our daughter lives here. So we came here because she lives here. Now, we really liked being in the States. The last time we left out of necessity, Jordan was also an associate professor up for tenure. And when you're up for tenure at Harvard, they look all over the world for senior professors. So you have to prepare to go somewhere else. And so he ended up going somewhere else. This time, it was really Canada that drove us here. The economy, the imposition of authoritarian policies that were more than likely going to impede what Jordan's freedom in the media. And he wasn't willing to compromise in that way. And so we moved down here. And it wasn't just that too, it was economic because the tax system in Canada is very high. And you know, I didn't know this, but if you have a company in Canada and you move to the States, you pay tax on what that business is worth. Not what you're making, but what it's worth. You pay tax on half that of what that's worth. So anyone who has tried to build a business in Canada and have moved it to the States, there's a real impediment for them moving because they will be taxed with half of what the company is worth, which might be really completely preposterous.
Yes. And arbitrary, like how can you actually know what the business is worth?
There's that as well.
And Christians would call that stealing, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Call that, yeah. So,
but that's in keeping with the times, really, that we have so much government overreach and the whole humanist narrative that we've been living in since like the Reformation, like a very, very long time. And so, you know, the outcome of that is way too much top-down authority. You know, when people don't take authority themselves, you know, and there's a lot of apathy in the West, and I would say right now in Canada because the government has so much overreach. There's a feeling of apathy, Like, what do I do about it? What can I do about it? And why should I put myself? They look more for peace of mind than responsibility in finding a way forward. Yeah. So that's why we're here, in a way, is that there were all those forces happening. And now that we're here, well, especially here in Arizona, there's a real sense of peace here and of goodwill. There's goodwill as well. There's not a lot of, there doesn't seem to be a lot of animosity and a lot of trouble. So it's good. There's a lot of sunshine. It's good. And of course, now we've had the change in administration, and I feel that things could, and with the Maha movement, there's good movement towards paying attention without fear to what is necessary. And
do you feel like things are going in a positive direction here compared to Canada? I know that Canada sort of feels lost in a lot of ways.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
The United States, you feel like, is better. Because sometimes I feel, and I'm in the north, so I'm in like Wisconsin, and then, there's Minnesota. They struggle. They're sort of moving into that authoritarian way of life. But you feel like here in Arizona, it's like freedom, and you can kind of do what you hope to do. Yeah,
you can go to a shooting gallery on Saturdays.
There you go. Very nice. So you guys have started. I want to talk a little bit about Peterson Academy. I've been doing it for like 6-7 months now.
Oh, yeah. How do you do it? How do you fit it into your life?
I stay up late and,
I see.
and then I sleep less. Yeah. I mean, the lectures are amazing. Like I tell everybody.
Do you watch one a night or?
It depends on how interested I am.
Yeah. Okay.
If with the Bonhoeffer ones, I was really interested in that. And because I think that there are parallels to our current time right now in the United States, the church, I think, is in a lot of ways completely compromised, especially a lot of the Protestant church. And so listening to how Bonhoeffer worked his way through trying to convince the church that like what's coming is really bad, I think is something that I'm very interested in. So that for me was like, I want to just zoom through that. Some of the ones, it's like Eric Kaufman did one on political science, right? And I thought that was really good. I find myself to be more interested, though, in the philosophical, theological stuff than like the analytical, scientific stuff, which is interesting. But I love it. I tell everybody you need to go do Peterson Academy. So, but what's that been like? I mean, you've been a part of that.
I think it's really good. I'm not that close, I mean, Michaela and Jordan Fuller really run it, and they are putting out 4 courses a month. So it's growing very fast. And Jordan and I just decided that we have, scheduled what we're going to do often. And we have movie nights and dinner nights where we walk around and see the city because we don't know it very well. But one of those nights I said, let's just watch a Peterson Academy lecture. And so we started watching Samuel Andreev, who's a composer, on the history of music. And that's good. Really? I learned a lot already. He's not a teacher. He's a musician. And so it really is coming right from the horse's mouth that this is what's happened in music, and this is how it plays out. And he has there's a small group of people that are standing or sitting around while he's leaning on the grand piano and now and then telling you what it means. It's good.
That seems to be something. So my wife went to the University of Wisconsin, and she's a civil engineer. One thing that she told me was that at the university, most of her professors were not engineers.
Right.
They had never done it before.
Right.
And so when she got into the workforce, she realized this is nothing like what they told me it was going to be like at the school. And so it's good I think it's really good to have those professors people teaching you who have actually done the thing. That seems like that should probably be how it is.
Well, these people, often they are people who see what's going on in the universities or in society, and they want to help people really see truly what's going on. And they're very good quality. They're, the professors from Cambridge and Oxford and Stanford and Princeton and Harvard and all those places that we were at Oxford recently.
Really?
Jordan was invited to the Oxford Union.
I saw, there's a video.
Yeah, there's a video. They kind of botched the audio, so it didn't come out very well, but it was really too bad because it was quite a remarkable thing to listen to. The people who run the Oxford Union, Jordan's been there 2 or 3 times, It's a very good place for debate. Michaela has even been there once on the carnivore diet. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can we live beyond meat or something it was called? But I think she did a very good job, and the other side was absolutely crazy. Yeah. But George was there, and the president of the Oxford Union, he had an agenda for sure. And he had plants, people who were in the crowd who were going to ask questions. And he was quite nice to George before it started, but then as soon as it started, he was just on him. And I think, fair enough in the game of debate, that's something. But it was a victim oppressor type of conversation the whole time, it's just not helpful.
Well, no. I mean, that's what the Jubilee thing was. I just watched that last night.
Yeah.
It's hard to watch. Everybody seems to be going on there to do a gotcha. Like they want to get some sort of clip, like I own Jordan Peterson or something like that. And it's just ruthless. It's very Marxist. It's very whoever can control the other person or have power wins. And there's not much, I guess, good faith. People aren't coming into this good faith. And that's young people. Like, do you see a problem?
Right.
So I'm 25. And a lot of my generation, that's how it feels like they interact with conversation. I have a hard time finding young people who just want to have a good conversation and try in good faith to disagree or to have a debate. It's all just power. It feels like you're just trying to protect yourself in the conversation. Do you find that with young people?
Well, I think that we have been going down this path of humanism, finding out how we can solve our problems, really, right? How can we have a better life? And how can I have a better life without any other influence or mentorship or anything? Well, how can I do that? Well, if I can find what you've done wrong, well, then I've got it made. Right. So they think that, and it even in my own life, it took me some real soul searching and self-reflection to realize that was causing me more angst and trouble than it was worth. And so I didn't even want to have that kind of interchange with people because it's stressful. It's stressful rather than finding out, I was listening to a sermon yesterday. It was good. And it was they were focusing on Psalms 27. And in it says, wait for the word of the Lord. And I've been learning in my tours with Jordan, learning about listening and what listening. And so I've talked a lot about listening. I talked about a story really when my sister, who now just passed away, she had dementia, but when she was 70 years old, we found out that she had dementia maybe when she was about 50. So it was 20 years. And so I actually had a great 20 years with her before she died, thank the Lord. But previous to that, we were always having altercations every time we got together. And she was about 7 years older than me, so she was my elder sister. And there was a lot of bit of there's feminist learnings, feminist lessons that we learned from our aunts and uncles, and not so much my mother, but my aunt and her mother. And so there was some of that. And so I was younger. And so I was watching my older sisters and their success or their failure in what they did. And they ended up taking their careers very seriously, getting married, but neither of their marriages lasted. And I think, because they put career first, and not just career, but also being the dominant person in the home, and not giving their husband the respect and place that was necessary for their children, for a good upbringing, balanced place for boys and girls in their homes, So their marriages didn't last. And I thought, well, I don't want to do that. At the same time, I was having this trouble with my sister. We kept arguing. And I said to Jordan, once we found out she had dementia, what can I do, do you think, to have the next 20 years go better? Because this is it. I know that in a way that most people don't think of it, we have a finite time together, which is true for all of us. But for her, it was more certain. And so it was more pressing. And he said, maybe you could just listen to her. I said, okay, fine. I'll do anything. So for the rest of the weekend, I just listened and agreed or listened or didn't say much and didn't get in any trouble. Right? I didn't get in any trouble, which was a change.
Yeah.
And I thought, there's something to this.
Yeah.
Maybe I could listen. And at the end of it, we went whale watching because we were on Vancouver Island. So we went whale watching and just with my aunt and my husband and I. And then we went to a restaurant that night on our way back, a Chinese restaurant. I wasn't sure I felt good in that restaurant. I think it might have been moldy now that I think about it. And she might have responded to this mold as well, because people do respond to mold. It makes your nose run and makes you angry. And so I know that now. I didn't know that. Anyway, she sat down at the table and she started saying, Tam, you never did anything independently. Mom and Dad did everything for you. I was now 40 years old with a family and a career and everything. But I had said I wasn't going to say anything. So I kind of kicked Jordan under the table, like, what's going on here? So she told me for about 5 minutes how I was not a responsible person. And then when she was done, she said, you're a really good mother. So it was as if she had this old story that was in her head she'd never shared with anyone. But because I had listened for 3 days, at the end of that 3 days, she told me what was in her heart and maybe what was between us. Well, when she was 21 years old, her fiancé died in a car crash, and I was 14. So they came home for the funeral, and there I was, this young 14-year-old who loved playing baseball and riding my bike and hadn't had any tragedy. And I think her heart was so hurting. And she looked at me and saw somebody who had it good. Yeah. And then she never really reflected on that to see what it was in her heart that was hurting, because it was very hard. This guy, he died in a car crash coming home from her house one night. So it was really, it's very, very sad. And they were my Romeo and Juliet couple. I was 14 and it was like, oh my goodness, my sister's in love and she's got her prince. And, I was so I was devastated when he died, as anybody would have been. But she didn't see that. She saw me as saved from any trouble. And so that was her theme in her life. Without sharing that with me ever, maybe I never listened, right? And so when it says, I love that in Psalms 27, wait for the word of the Lord. It's like, yes, you have to wait. That's listening. That's when you feel discomfort. You don't turn to Amazon to buy something, and you don't turn to a bottle of whiskey to drink it. You don't numb and it's really hard. You don't numb your discomfort. You wait. You think, oh, I'm being challenged. God, I'm in this situation. Obviously, I have a lesson to learn. If I can sit with this long enough, the answer and the way forward will become clear. But you have to wait for it. You have to wait for it. So learning to sit in discomfort, I don't think people do that anymore.
No, probably because we have phones and people go on social media every 3 minutes. So how do you break away from that? Because there's this deep temptation, especially the younger you are, the more you've grown up in the system of technology, to whenever you feel uncomfortable. I mean, I know young people who just sit in circles. They're supposed to be hanging out and talking at a fire, and they just all go on their phone the whole time. Sometimes
talking to each other.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, how do you stop that?
Well, I think it's up to us. We're responsible for we are responsible for our personal relationship with God, ultimately, with the unity that is God, ultimately, but also with every interaction that we make. If we want to be making sure that we're doing the best we can, then it has to be from a place of truth and generosity and respect and all of those virtues that are built that you read in the Bible when you read it. You don't see those things in modern art anymore. You don't see them in architecture. You don't see them in fashion. you know, with the pants that were down so you could see the crack of someone's bum.
Yes.
That's not beautiful.
No.
That's not beautiful.
And then on, what women wear, it's like, if I go outside half the time, I've got to have a blindfold on. It's like, because they're just, everything's exposed, and that isn't beauty. That's just, sensual. Yes, exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, but when I talk to people my age about this sort of thing, they're like, you're a prude or whatever. If you're just a fundamentalist or something. It's like, well, no, I don't think so. I just don't think that God created men and women to be promiscuous and to like show off all of their body. But like, and even when it comes to stories as well and movies, and there's this, what you're talking about, I haven't seen in a movie in a long time, in a Hollywood or a Disney movie in a long time.
Oh, not a Disney movie.
No,
probably not.
And you just watched that documentary, How Should We Then Live, right?
Yes.
And so he talks about this sort of humanist idea that's
coming from the Reformation. So we talk about the Enlightenment, the French Enlightenment, as the beginning of humanism. But he said that even back at the Reformation, there were two ways we could go. We could stay with what was learnt from the Bible. We could stay with that and recognize the teaching from that was true, or we could decide that we knew better. And so that is where the humanism began to grow in the philosophical realm with Kant, with Descartes, with all of in modern art, with Picasso. It was interesting because I loved Picasso. I studied Gauguin. Gauguin also he was a part of the naturalist, go back to nature, the Rousseauian idea that you go back to nature and that man was all good.
Yeah.
Man was all good.
Yes.
And in paradise really is what he was envisioning, and even though he didn't know it, he was going back to Genesis, but he didn't even know it, right? But he assumes in that it's society and everything else, that we have to control these things in the human realm to make things go well, when that's just not the way. Anyway, we've gone further and further towards humanism being the way we educate our kids, maybe even the way that we teach in the church, because also churches got further away from the Bible and more into the church, so that maybe even quoting scripture wasn't the best way that you could have this personal relationship. And it's you have to go back to the Word of God, but we've lost that. So then we eventually get to the present. And now people are questioning, well, if we are in control of our destiny, then we can be in control of our bodies. And now we can cut up our bodies and become whoever we want to. Yeah, but that is the natural conclusion of that, is authoritarianism, genetic manipulation.
Transhumanism.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the interesting things that been trying to think through is that, like, everything you said is like, I totally agree with. And I think that we need to go back to a mimetic sort of, the God created natural laws and we can't change those natural laws. We just have to sort of conform our life to that. The weird thing that happened though was the Industrial Revolution, was that people started to think, well, we can take this material and we can create whatever we want out of it. We've got phones, cameras, cars, engines, planes. We went to space, and that sort of went into, I think, what happened over the past 100 years is this massive push in postmodernism and then into transgenderism and transhumanism. Because if we can make whatever technology we want, if we can go to space, if we can take the raw materials of the world, make whatever we want out of it, then we can obviously do that with our own body. And it's a very deceptive thing. So when you try to tell people about that dynamic, I think people are confused because they're like, well, like right now we're using microphones and cameras and we're in a house with lights and everything. So how do you, I guess, and I don't know if you have an answer to this, but how do you talk to people?
There's two choices.
Yes.
We have two choices.
Yep.
We can follow what we think is right, or we can get our inspiration. What is inspiration? What is our conscience?
Yeah. Well,
that's conscience and calling.
Yeah.
Right. Those are biblical. Those are biblical ideas. If we follow, if in this place of media and engineering and all of that, we look to ourselves and find out what our intuition says, not our manipulative ideas, but deep intuition that comes to us, not things we've thought up, right? But what comes to us. And also awareness of conscience, thinking that thing that's happening over there, I don't agree with, and not speaking up about it. Those are sins of omission, if you want to talk biblically, right? So if we don't have this underpinning unity to what we say, then it's not going to go up to what's best. It's going to veer off into power is one way. It's going to veer off either power or
like sex and
depravity.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So that's
the end result.
Right. And so is that where we're going? Like
yes.
And so
yes, that's where we're going.
Okay. So, that's sort of, I guess, why I came to talk to you, because that's one of the directions that we can go into, the sex and power and that thing. It seems,
although we all know about that already, don't we?
It's been happening and we're in the midst of it. There are a lot of people who want to I think there are a lot of people who intuitively feel like, I want to get out of this. I don't know how to get out. I'm such a slave to my phone. I'm a slave to the devices and the technologies. How do you?
Well, I took X off my phone.
I did too a couple of weeks ago. That is a bad place.
It's a necessary place though, because you don't want to put evil somewhere you can't see it.
That's true.
Because we want to know, like, what's going on? What are they thinking about? Oh my goodness, maybe we should comment on that. Yeah. But it shouldn't. But you got to be careful because the evil is wily. It's sneaky.
Yes.
It's sneaky and insidious.
Yes.
And simplistic. So it's easy and all of that. And so it's hard not to succumb to something like that. So you don't want to put yourself in the line of fire, right? So maybe you can see what's going on, but with stealth. Yeah. And so I think that we have to have that, and we have to have like really good boundaries. Yeah. I'm going to go talk next year to a group of people who are talking about social media and children. And I've been thinking about, okay, what do I want to talk about? And so I was sending off just a snippet of it. So I went over it last week. And boundaries. I really want to talk about boundaries and social media, but like, what are boundaries, and where do you need boundaries, and what do boundaries mean?
Yeah.
Right? Because people think, boundaries, those are authoritarian limitations that society is putting on us.
Yes, because everybody's a liberal in the negative sense.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So, okay, but what do
you do with your little kids with boundaries? Do you have any boundaries with your
No, they do whatever they want.
Whatever they want, right?
Yeah, no, we have boundaries. We have a lot of boundaries. I mean, a lot of it comes down to, well, it's like a dance, because you don't want to have too strict of boundaries, because then they just become robots. Exactly. You have to like leave it open enough and free enough. And I've seen a lot of people, especially dads who are, I don't think, very good, just structure everything way too much. And their kids never learn who they are. They don't know who they're supposed to be and what God's called them into.
Often that happens when you do things for them. Mothers can do that. They can do so much. Husbands and wives can do this. You can do so much for your husband or your wife.
You infantilize
and then
them,
you think, you just keep making these mistakes. Well, if I do what it is that I want them to learn, they're not going to learn it. Doesn't matter who they are and how sophisticated they are. If I do it, they don't learn how to do it. So you have to have boundaries that are good for them. They're good for them. Yeah. Not necessarily.
And you have to be vigilant too, because
not necessarily good for me.
Yes. Well, that's exactly right. There was one interesting situation where I was like, for some reason, for a couple of weeks, after the kids would go to bed, I'd go downstairs and clean the toys up. And then I was like, why am I doing this? Right. They can clean the toys up. Why am I cleaning the toys up for them? They play with them. They bring them out. And when we do cleanup time, they like it. Like they're like, we're putting the toys back into the bin, and they think it's fun, and they're like doing a duty. And I was like, Andrew, I think we need to just not do this for the kids anymore. They should probably just clean the toys up on their own. And so now we've implemented that. Good. And they like it because they feel like they're being a part of something, and they can, and we're very encouraging to them. But I think
like at dinner time, same thing.
Yes.
They can set the table. As soon
Yes,
as they
we
can
do
reach
that.
the
Yes.
table, they can
Yeah.
set the table.
Yeah, I say, Titus, can you go put this put the plates at our spots? And he loves it.
He loves
Sometimes
it.
the plates
Of course
are
he loves, yeah.
all over the place, but he loves it. He thinks he's like a part of making dinner.
He is a part of
He
making-
is, and it is. Yes, he absolutely is. And so
Yeah.
these boundaries. So I think you're right. But when it comes to social media, I personally cannot think of a single reason why any kid from ages 0 to 18, and probably till they're like 35, should ever be on social media. So.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, that's the conversation, isn't it? You know, my kids are now in their 30s, early 30s. They were never inside really. You know, Julian, my son, he had computer games that he would play with his friends, but mostly on a sleepover kind of thing. But he was outside playing street hockey most of the time, or hide and seek, or whatever they played. They played some of these funny games. You know, I used to, when I was a kid, I skipped outside with my friends till the sun went down, and then I had to go in, you know, or we played hide and seek till the sun went down, till the street lights went on, and then we had to go home. And so I wasn't home until it was dark. There was nothing for me that was more important in the house than I could find outside the house. And I was getting socialized with the other friends, because if I didn't want to play their games, they wouldn't play with me. So I had to make sure that I was putting my needs secondary to the group's needs, which is helps with sprouting narcissism in yourself, thinking that you always get your way. But how do you get that on a computer game? If you're sitting in, you can always just get out. If the computer game isn't going the way you want, you can just play another game. You don't have to finish that game. You don't have, there isn't a necessity for multiple games even. And that's, when you play sports, say you're on a hockey team and you're not a team player, they're not going to invite you on the team next year.
And you can't just quit halfway through the game if you're not
That's
winning.
right. If you're not winning. Yeah, that's
yeah,
right. So you have to, it teaches you resilience, right? And it teaches you cooperation, and it teaches you competition, because you want to win. And it's good that you want to win, but you have to cooperate with the rest of your team in order to make the point. And it doesn't always have to be you making the point.
Yes. And that's
and
why.
You learn all of that,
Yeah.
Fair play and all of that. But do you learn that on a computer game?
I don't think so. I mean, I played sports growing up, and at the tail end of my childhood is when they started giving out participation awards. I even hate saying it. Yeah. And it's like, we got 25th place at a tournament one time, and we got a medal for that.
Yeah, that's
and
so
I was
sad.
like, I'm throwing that in the garbage because we don't deserve a medal
It's
for
a lie.
25th. It is
That's
a lie.
a lie. Yeah.
So you got a whole generation, multiple generation of kids growing up basically thinking that, they don't learn resilience because they're affirmed in losing, and you have to learn how to lose in life.
And that makes apathy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't learn how to lose, how are you going to deal with life? You're going to lose a lot in life, and you got to learn how to move past that. And
I've been writing about that because I'm writing a book.
Are you really?
Yeah, I'm writing a book. Well, I got asked to write a book a couple of times. I thought, okay.
About what?
I hear it. I'm going to write a book. It's a memoir, but it's really about my conversion. But it starts out being whatever you can write about, because you have to write. You have to have something to say, so you write about whatever comes to mind. But I've been writing about, first of all, I started writing about all the things I could remember that were trouble, because that's what you do remember. Often you remember what was most searing in your memory, I guess. But then once I kind of got through all of that from my childhood, then I started focusing on the things that I did do. And what I realized was that I was learning resilience that was in response to the troubles that I had. I would put myself forward into mostly sports games, mostly games. I did a lot of games. I played in a lot of sports, like constantly sports, until I left home when I was 18. And in writing all of that and describing all of that, I'm getting a better, more balanced memory of my childhood, really realizing that I was using my troubles. I was recognizing that I had troubles, and instead of wallowing in that trouble, I was stepping above it and putting myself forward as capable, in spite of my suffering, which is really what you hope for kids to learn, is that they will rise above what has come their way as a challenge rise above, and really with the community, because each person in the community holds each other up. You know, you're more able to carry on.
Yeah, one of the best parts about sports, and one of the things that I'm most grateful for, I played basketball, a lot of basketball. I played football, basketball.
I did too, until everybody grew way taller than me.
I was taller than everybody until I hit high school, and then people would be like 6'7", 6'8", and I was just like a 6 foot white guy. And then, you know, but there's these situations in sports, especially in basketball, where you're down by 1 or 2 points, you've got 30 seconds left, and someone's got to take the last shot, right? And a lot of people don't want to take the last shot because if you miss it, then it's your fault. If you make it, it's great. And I feel like I got to take that last shot several times throughout my childhood. And those situations, I just felt like were I didn't know it at the time, but they prepared me for whatever was going to come in my actual real life. Like, you've got to be prepared to make or miss the shot. Sometimes I missed it, and that sucks. And sometimes you make it and it feels great. But if you don't have the courage to actually take the shot, it doesn't. I don't think you're going to be able to do what it takes when you get older and you have a difficult situation with your, I think about, this is kind of fun. My wife will be like, I don't know why you brought that, but why I'm bringing this up. But when my wife and I fight, when we argue with each other, it can be easy to not try to finish the fight. It can be easy to just walk away from it and be like, I'm not going to deal with this anymore. I don't want to fight anymore. But I think that you should fight it out. I think you should finish the fight no matter what. And so her and I will finish the fight, even if it goes late into the night. And I think I got some sort of resilience from sports, basically, to be like, we're going to finish the fight. We're going to, and when I say the fight, I mean.
What do you mean by finish?
Learn how to love each other again. And I say fight, I'm using aggressive language, but.
So what changes between the time that there's the conflict?
Yeah.
And then there's the pursuit of the resolution? What changes there?
We're trying to figure out, well, that's a good question. So what changes, has to be our attitude and the heat of the conversation, because we can both get really heated. Yeah. So sometimes that means, which this bothers me because I just want to do it, but she's like, she needs to go to a different room for like 30 minutes, think about it, and then we come back together. I think the thing that changes is our attitude towards each other. Like, are we trying to win, or are we trying to have a good marriage? And those are two different things, you know? Yeah. And I grew up, and my parents, they were first generation Christians. They came from really dysfunctional families. So they would argue to try to win, and things would get kind of brutal sometimes.
Yes. Yeah, because if you win, somebody loses.
Exactly. Yeah. And if somebody loses too many times, somebody's going to blow up and there's going to be a problem later on. And so they learned like halfway through my childhood that that's like unacceptable through, that there was a certain catastrophe in my family. And then I saw them for the rest of my life try to argue for the good of the other. And it totally changed my perspective. Changed it.
So last night we were watching this movie,
the documentary.
The documentary. And I get really tired at night. I don't last through the day very well. I love the day, but I have to get a 2-hour nap at 4 p.m. to have an evening. A lot of autoimmune troubles. Anyway, so last night we were watching this, and I was seriously watching it because I thought, I'm just going to stay awake and I'm going to learn this stuff, see what it was. And it was interesting because he does a very good job of talking about history and how things have come from the time of the Greeks really forward. Yeah. So it's a very good overview with a theme to the present, all through all the humanities really, philosophy, art, just everything. Yeah. Anyway, so we got through about 6 of the 10, and they're about half an hour each, right? So I was motoring through them, and Jordan's he's kind of like in and out of consciousness. He's having a little nap beside me. And finally he wakes up. He wakes up and he takes the controller and he turns it down because they were at the French Revolution and they were guillotining people. And that was a little noisy. And it woke him up. And he turns around and he turns it down. And I said something kind of sharp to him, like, "Hey, wait a minute. Yeah. I'm watching this,
Yeah.
But he had been sleeping. And so then I woke him up because I responded, right? Well, then he was like grumpy. Yeah. Okay, so he was grumpy, and so that was the end of watching that because now there was an issue. There's an issue. So I get up and I leave the room. I think, whatever, I'm not doing this. And, but he can't leave that alone because he does pursue me whenever there's a problem.
Does he like follow you?
Oh, yeah.
That's what I do. And Andrea does not
I wouldn't
like
say
that.
that's a good idea.
Okay. Okay. Yeah,
No, well, it's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's better. It would have been better for him to go into his room and figure out his culpability and me to come in here and figure out what I've done and then to reconvene.
Do you have agreed upon, you would need to like agree upon a time to come back and reconvene? Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
Right. And maybe if it's late, it's the morning, because maybe really you should get some sleep, and then in the morning, it'll only take 2 minutes to figure out instead of an hour and a half at night, which is not good because you have responsibilities of children in the morning and you have responsibility of podcasts and working and praying and whatever else you do in the morning. So don't sacrifice the night. I would disagree with that.
Oh, really?
Don't sacrifice the night.
Okay.
No.
All right.
Not because is that best? Because you want what's best.
Is there a proverb that says don't let the sun go down in your anger?
Is that.
Is that a proverb?
There
or
is
that.
But, and don't.
Okay.
You're going to your bedroom to self-reflect. You're finding out what you brought to the problem. That's not anger.
Sure. Well, and maybe
if you go to bed and think, well, that's not good. That is not good, and you shouldn't do that.
So, like, go to your
not
room.
for very long, like for as short a time as you can manage. So, I would say that there was a couple of things that went on that made me more and more angry, and then I went to bed, and I was pretty. Not very happy with them when I went to bed. And I woke up about 1:30 and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm still unhappy. And so I started to pray, right? So I started to pray the Lord's Prayer. And then I was like, I'm going to pray the Jesus Prayer, which I really like, the Orthodox Jesus Prayer. Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And that's so good because it says, Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And it brings you into humility,
it's
right?
Repentant. It's
it definitely is. So if you repeat it enough, you will get closer to humility and then you will have revelations.
What is that, the repeating? Because I grew up in non-denominational low church and there was not much repeating of anything.
Yeah.
Some of the songs repeated bad lyrics, but other than very shallow lyrics. But when I do liturgy, there's a lot of repeating. What is the repetition? Why is that helpful? Yeah.
I think because we practice prayer. That's what we call it, right? We don't say we recite prayer or we read prayer. We practice prayer. Why do we practice prayer? So that when we need the prayer is there. But if you don't practice, then it's not there when you need it. So the practice is done not in the heat of the moment, but in the everyday. Yeah. And then when you have an evening like this where you're disagreeing and you go into your bedroom and you are trying to find a way to resolution, then you can use those practices that you've put in place of those prayers, and you can put them in place. And what happened last night was that I prayed probably not very many times before I fell asleep. I prayed the Jesus prayer, and when I woke up in the morning, I thought, oh, I forgive him. So the forgiveness came because my intention, I woke up in the middle of the night, changed my intention to the proper intention. I was away from the argument long enough that I cooled down, that I could change my intention, and then through the more restful sleep, find forgiveness in the morning. And so then I saw him and I said, I forgive you. He goes, yeah, I forgive you too. And then we went on a walk and started talking about it. Like, why did that happen and everything? Yeah. And so in the morning, I have a practice where you saw here, above here, there's Moore Mountain. Yes. I walk up there every morning. I walk up there and I take my rosary and I pray the rosary on the way up. And it seems good because I'm walking and there's nothing to really distract me. Because if I do it here, sometimes the phone rings or a workman arrives or something, and then I have to answer to that. But if I'm walking up the mountain, there's really not much that can get in my way of the time that I've set aside to pray. And so we walked up the hill and talked. Instead of praying, we talked together, which was good because he had some self-reflection and he shared it with me. And I helped him with what I have learned to do with my trouble. And he learned something that I think he probably has never learned. And he's now 63. So you can keep learning.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
these things may have been instantiated in your behavior for forever and ever, and you didn't know they're there. But now he knows it's there. And I said, once you know it's there, once you know that you have a response to something that isn't best, and you can recognize it, you can play with it. Yeah. Right? So if you say something to me and it makes me angry, and then I feel some resentment or some self-pity or whatever it is, they're all kind of related. And I'm holding on to that. Then what I'm doing is I'm imposing you as the oppressor.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm making you into the oppressor so that I can
you feel
be
justification.
Yeah. In my denial of my own responsibility. Yeah. And so that's what we're doing when we have an argument and we hold on to it, no matter what it is, because you have to find even this much of what you had to do with how things went. And as soon as you do that, you can find forgiveness. Yeah. It hardly takes any understanding at all, and forgiveness will prevail. Yeah. Wow. It's like, isn't it? It's a tiny light.
Yeah. Did you learn that when you became a Christian? Did that start earlier than?
I think that started, well, I don't know when that started, because I had a practice of meditation for absolutely many, 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 many years before I started to pray. And that wasn't sufficient, but it was actually a good underpinning to, and this is just something I just learned recently, is I spent many years emptying like a Buddhist, emptying my mind of whatever, anything, and replacing it with whatever colors and feelings sure. But not vagueness. It's quite vague. That whole practice is for vagueness. And what I've understood now is that actually what you have to do is you have to empty. You have to get to a place where you're not thinking about this horrible person over there, right? So you're not ruminating about your justification for who you are. You have to get to a point where you are humble and you're letting go. Yeah, I did that too. I asked to let go this morning, let go and let God. I just asked to let it go. And then forgiveness came. That was part of it. But if you do that, you let go, you have to replace it with scripture. So you can't just empty your consciousness of all the trouble. Because it's going to go somewhere.
Yes.
You have to direct it with scripture. And that's what I think it was Thomas Merton said, that meditation was meant to be done with scripture.
Yes.
And I thought, oh, gee, if I would have known that years ago, I would have put scripture in its place, but I didn't know.
Does it say, I feel like it says in one of the epistles. I can't remember
where that's written, but.
In one of the epistles, I think it's Paul, I might be wrong about this, but that you should meditate on the scriptures. Like that's the whole.
Right.
Yeah.
So, these practices that we have now with the yoga community and how, whatever other communities of Eastern thought that are kind of in a passive way trying to bring themselves to a better place, it's not the best.
It's halfway.
Yeah, it's halfway.
Yeah.
It's halfway. You have to replace it with scripture. And as soon as you do, you're forgiven. Yeah. Yeah. Like it works. It's amazing.
Well, okay. That's great. And I totally agree. I guess the thing that I'm seeing and what you're talking about, I mean, one, it requires a lot of discipline. It requires for you to know the scriptures. It requires for you to read your Bible. It requires for you to pray and to put practices in. Yeah. How do you implement that? So I'm even thinking about my kids. This week we've started to do the Lord's Prayer every night before bed. At the end of the week, now Titus knows the Lord's Prayer and he can say it, and it's really cool. For a lot of parents, though, who maybe didn't grow up in Christian families, maybe they're first-time Christians, it's really hard to figure out how to implement these things, because if you don't grow up in it, if you haven't experienced it or your parents haven't done it for you, you don't know what you should do for your own kids. And so you sort of end up going along with the culture rather than doing what the Bible tells you, doing the things that you've just talked about.
Well, what came to me, when I first had this revelation that God was real in a way that I could not deny. Yeah. Then I had to put something in place. And so it really wasn't very long after that this friend came to the hospital and offered me a rosary. And that was very, very good because I had to, first of all, it explained to me the New Testament. So it was the gospel story. It was the gospel story. So that was good. I was learning the gospel story. And it was in terms of accepting Mother Mary as my intercession to Jesus. And that brought me closer to accepting Jesus Christ as my Savior. So it did work the way it's supposed to work. Eventually I got more curious and I wanted to know the underpinning of each of the mysteries. So then I started, instead of just doing the rosary, I started to read the Bible and then pray, and read the Bible and then pray. And then I got to the point where now I pray the rosary, and on the way down the mountain, I listen to the Bible. Oh, good. So I go up, try to clear my mind.
Yes.
To give, what do I do? Ruslan, KD, he wrote a book called Godly Admiration, I think is what it's called. Anyway, I really liked what he said. He said what he has learned is to pray for adoration first.
Yes, yeah. Acts, adoration, confession, thanksgiving. What's the S stand for? I can't remember. You go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. That's
it's
good.
It's Acts, ACTS, right? Is that right or wrong?
Well, Acts, yeah. And it stands for adoration.
Adoration, confession, thanksgiving. The S is, for some reason I'm blanking it. Supplication.
Okay, yeah. So he talks about start with adoration, then pray for those in need, then pray for what you need, and I used to always leave that out.
What you need.
Yeah, I would always leave that out.
It feels a little weird because you're like, Lord,
but you got to put that in there. You got to put that in. You got to ask.
Well, he says, ask and you will receive.
Yeah, that's right. And then memorize a scripture at the end. And I thought, that's very good. That's very good. So then there's those 4 aspects of my daily hour.
Yeah.
It's my daily hour.
What are you memorizing right now?
Well, first of all, I memorized the Nicene Creed because the Catholic Church I go to doesn't say the Apostles' Creed, it says the Nicene Creed. And it took me a long time to figure out, what are they talking about? But I found it.
Yeah. You're lucky they don't do the Athanasian Creed. That goes on and on and on.
Oh, okay.
After the Athanasian Creed, I think they were like, we got to stop doing these because they just keep getting longer and longer. But yeah, the Nicene Creed is what we do at the Anglican Church. So it's a good one. Yeah. So you memorized it.
Well, I'm memorizing it. Nice. What did I memorize first? St. Michael. That prayer. I memorized that prayer first because I think that's and we end each Mass with the St. Michael's prayer.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah.
And really because of what Jordan and I have been through with having to leave Canada and then getting so deathly ill, I think it feels like it's a holy war to me.
Yeah.
And it also, I'm sure Jordan believes that I'm not absolutely sure, but I'm pretty sure he feels like it's a holy war. And so having the St. Michael's prayer close at my heart, I think is a good preparation. It's a good bulwark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean by holy war? Do you mean spiritual war?
Yep.
Okay. And what exactly do you mean by spiritual war?
What do I mean by that? I mean that there are evil forces in the world and that it's up. And that is actually what Schaeffer, is that his name, says he says it's up to each of us.
Yeah.
It's up to each of us to wake up, to go back to what the first people were learning when just after Christ was resurrected, was that you had to pay attention to the Word of God. And so we have to go back to the Word of God and not very many of us have to do it, but everybody who can must. And we have to go back to the Word of God in order to take back the society from this precipice of authoritarianism, which is the end of humanism.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the spiritual war, I think, is really important because it's something that even a lot of Christians and certainly non-Christians aren't even thinking about. So, there's been this rise in blaming the Jews for everything in all of life, which I think is insane. But in Ephesians, it says our battle is not against flesh and blood, but it's against the principalities, it's against evil, it's against darkness. And a lot of people lose sight of that when things in society, when the culture begins to feel unstable, they start to try to find somebody to blame for their problems
and somebody to help them, which they're turning to the government,
which is the government, and not their own responsibility, or not towards God and his
because
commands.
if you turn to the government, they'll take care of you all right, and they'll tell you what you can and can't do.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And you'll feel more structure, but it's a false structure. It's a fake structure. It's a facade. So that spiritual war, I think that's really important. How do you get kids to see the spiritual war? Children. And I know I'm asking a lot about children. I think this all can be applicable to adults.
About children, really, yeah.
Yeah. How do you get them to like not just see the physical realm? It's very important to know that we live in a physical realm, but there are forces at play. And I think
they got to go to. I think they got to go to church, and they have to learn scripture. You know, my grandchild, who's now 7, turning 8 this summer, came for dinner last night, and she said, "What do you like? What do you like the most, Grandma?" And I said, my grandkids. Yeah. What's the most meaningful thing to me? My grandkids. So she drew me a picture of me surrounded by herself and her little brother and her baby sister, right? And on a napkin.
Nice.
With the felt pen. Okay. And she cut it out. It was very cute. And then and Jordan said, "You, Scarlett." So that was just a picture of Scarlett. And she had a little cross right here on her body. And then she chose Jesus Christ with a bunny.
There you go.
With a bunny.
Yeah. There it goes.
Yeah. And it was, she goes to church on Sundays. I've taught her to pray the rosary a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. And she knows I pray. So when she talks to me, she says, "I know that Jesus is your favorite thing." So she called you on your grandkids thing. She said, "No, it's Jesus." Yeah. No. Well, she drew the grandkids. She liked that, but she knew when she drew the cross that it was also as important to me as it was to her, which I think is a grandmother's duty. Yeah. I think it's a grandmother's duty to, in the wisdom of years of being through, having been a mother, a wife, that it's time to help young people to find out what is the best way forward to support their children so that they will be have some infrastructure around them to keep them safe so that they can go out into the storm and prevail. Yeah. So if there were things, if you could go back and knowing what you know now and redo being a mother. Yeah, I would take them. I would absolutely baptize them and take them to church and read them scripture every night. And I think I'd start at dinner time. Yeah, I think I'd start at dinner time just reading a little bit at every dinner. Yeah, because that way everybody's there. That way everybody's there. And you don't want to just eat and rush away. No, because there has to be some adoration. There should be some adoration there. So a little bit of scripture, I think, and it doesn't have to be very much, but a little bit of scripture at the table, and then prayer before you go to bed. We do. After we eat dinner at the table, we'll read a little bit of the Bible. Yeah. And then after that, Titus will say, "Time to do catechism," or something like that. So we read the Anglican catechism a little bit. And it's like people think, well, it's a 1.5-year-old and a 2-year-old. They don't understand. I don't know. I think they do, actually. Yeah. They don't have any cynicism is what they don't have. Right. Yeah. And it's been incredible to see that at 2.5 years old, reading these things to him and going to the Anglican church and doing the liturgy, he sings, praise God from whom he sings that. And that's a beautiful song. And he just loves it. And sometimes like one time, this was really funny. He was at my parents' house and they were like, Titus just sort of stopped in the middle of the living room and he put his hands out and my parents were like, "What are you doing?" And he was like, "I'm praying," because he saw it at church that's what the priest does. He puts his hands out and prays. And so those sorts of things are sort of structuring his way of understanding the world. So at this church I go to, there's this couple that come in. They have 2 little kids, a little girl and a younger little boy. Yeah. And he comes in with, things to do. Yeah. He has a toy or a book or something. He comes in with something to do. And that's the deal, obviously, that they've made. He comes to church, he can bring something. So he comes in, and at the beginning of church, maybe he'll sit in the pew ahead or something, right? And then it doesn't take very long. He sits back by his dad, he gets back to it. So I'm watching him. But the little girl, she's a little older, so she's paying attention to the whole service and the body gestures that you're supposed to do and all of that. But then it gets to the point where there's the Eucharist, and then the priest asks everybody to give the sign of peace to everyone. And I turn around and I see him, and he's sitting on his dad's knee, and she's sitting on her mother's knee, and they are cuddled in tight to their parents. And that's the way the rest of the Mass goes, because that looking to other people and giving them the sign of peace creates belonging and community. And they have no cynicism. So they just come right in for it. It's like, I belong and I'm part of this, and there's no separation.
Which is what we should be
beautiful.
Like. Yeah. I think that's what Jesus means when he says to have faith like a child. It's like, that's
beautiful.
what we should do. Yeah.
No, kids, we can learn from their faith, because their faith is, it's not tarnished at all.
It's hopeful. They have a lot of hope, and it's really cool.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. It's convicting, and I mean, it makes me, it's weird, because I've thought about, like, you want to raise them to be able to go out into the world. At some point, they've got to deal with the fact that the world is difficult and things are not necessarily good. But I always, whenever I think about that, them growing up and having to deal with the world, it always makes me sad, because that just means that at some point they're going to have to deal with the brutalities of how people treat you and things like that. And at this age, when they're so small, you're just like, I don't want you to ever have to experience the bad things of the world. How can who can they look to, or what can children look to be able to build up the resilience? Obviously Scripture, obviously the Bible, obviously Christ, but even
if you didn't have that.
Well, right. Stories.
Absolutely.
Books.
Stories, but also, self-sacrifice is the foundation on what Christianity is built on, is self-sacrifice. Christ's sacrifice is our sacrifice as well, if we're going to live in the best way we can. And so you teach children self-sacrifice. You teach them, especially if they have siblings, it's really best, because the oldest sibling has to sacrifice for the younger sibling to have their part of the party, And so that's the first learning experience, is having more than one child, so that you can bring the story and build the story as them being a part of it, and that their job is to make the whole situation more cohesive, to offer what you can, like the little kids setting the table. Yes. They're offering, and they have such joy in it, because it is the offering that makes everything shine. Yes. Yeah, and you want to help them find the burning bushes in their lives. Where things look interesting, investigate it, deepen it. That's your burning bush, and that will be the guide through your whole life, is looking at something that's interesting to you, or maybe even distressing to you, because it might be a burning bush, and a burning bush isn't exactly something nice. It's hot, it'll damage you, right? So a burning bush isn't always something that's nice and easy. It's a challenge. And like you said, my kids are going to have to face the challenges of the world. Yeah, they are. And you want them to, because they're the saviors of the world. Mm-hmm.
And they're going to have to face the challenges of God. I mean, the bush is, there's a danger. There's a, what does C.S. Lewis say about Aslan? He says he's not a tame lion. He's not a tame lion. You don't want your king to be a tame king. You want them to be, there's some sort of
want them to be formidable.
A warrior. Yeah. And that's not always approachable. It's not always easy to approach. And
you want them to be able to discern what's a good idea and what's not a good idea.
So what's the age of,
at 7. At 7, okay, kids can really think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's when you start to introduce some of the more,
nuanced ideas. Yes, that's for sure. Before 7, you can teach them the, once they're 4, they start to socialize. Yeah. Before that, like when they're below 4, well, even below 3, they don't play together. They play parallel play, but they don't actually play together. Right. They don't know how. Yeah. So they don't know how to negotiate until they're about 3 or 4 years old. They learn to negotiate. And then when they're about 7, they start to think. Yeah. And so then you can really, like my little granddaughter, she can think. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so she knows, Grandma, Jesus Christ is important to you. Like, so she's thinking about what that means.
That's that's
7.
Yeah. So 7 years old. So, okay. Well, we've been working on animated children's TV show.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's interesting because I mean, there's a lot of dynamics that go into creating something like that, but the story obviously is the most important thing, what drives the story. And I guess my question for you would be, when you look at media, movies, TV, what's influencing children, well, first I'll ask you, what do you see is wrong with what's happening in the world right now? And then we can move into what would you like to see, or what's wrong with the media right now? And then what would you like to see go better in the future? What do you think children need to be seeing that are complementing what their parents are doing rather than working against them?
I interviewed a couple yesterday, Nathan and Delitha Myers, and they worked 10 years on a film. You know, he was in the film industry. She was in the musical theater industry, and he was wondering which way to go, and he got a calling, a vision from God to say, sell your house and sell your truck. And he thought, okay, I guess I'll sell my house and sell my truck. And he told his wife, and she said, well, if that's what you were told, then that's what you do. So, you know, so he started doing that. And then right at the same time, one of his friends called and he wanted him to do a screenplay. And he was saying, you know, I'm thinking of getting out of the film business, because I think he had been in Hollywood and things hadn't gone that well. And, but then he'd sold his house and he sold his truck. So he thought, oh, maybe I should go make this film. So he goes to make this film, but nothing really happens there. And then he's just kind of, you know, searching, looking for the next right step. And he says, you know, I think we should make a film about children and about education and make it into a hopeful place. And his wife she just heard that screenplay and thought, oh, and just started writing a screenplay. She just started writing, had never written before, just thought she just started writing a screenplay. And over time, this screenplay has turned into a movie that they have produced, and it's going to be launched on June 22nd, called Area Appleton Shines. And it talks about how a child can navigate to, like, in the spirit of what is best, guided by God, to turn from a person who is only in it for herself to someone who is there to serve her fellow man, and to see how that can take her up Jacob's ladder, really, and into a good place. So there's things like that are going on that are very good. Mm-hmm. And
what is it? What is it about children? Like what themes in these stories?
So Jordan wrote something, selfauthoring.com, where you have the past authoring, which shows up an autobiography. If things keep coming back to you from the past, maybe you should write them all down and flesh it out. That's what I'm doing in my book, right? For myself, is fleshing it out. That's kind of like the past authoring. Then the present authoring is identifying your virtues and your faults, so that you can look at who you are truly in the present, and to make strategies on how to bring your faults over to the virtue side. And then the future authoring is to imagine who you'd be, a vision for yourself 3 to 5 years down the road, if you were taking very good care of yourself, the best that you could, who you might be, and what you would be doing, and who you might be, and then identifying goals in that regard, and then seeing how it unfolds. Well, now they're going to develop a future authoring. I think it's just a future authoring for kids 11 to 14 years old. Oh, wow. So now this will be 2 weeks, a vision for the next 2 weeks, because they don't look that far in the future.
That's good. Yeah. Wow.
But they'll also have snippets of the same ideas, but there'll be more animation in it, or, so there'll be more. It'll be more guided more to what children would respond to and be inspired by. And so I think that the future authoring is one of the most important things that Jordan has done, because it allows each of us to dream and to pray about who we might be if we were going to be the best we could be. Yeah. And that's a very good dream. That's a very good reflection, meditation, is to meditate on that. And then what you can do step by step to make that come true. Yeah. And I found it very, very helpful. When I first did this, it was probably 20 years ago when it wasn't even computerized, just on paper. And I made a dream, and years later, I kind of looked around me and thought, oh, I think I've created what I dreamt about. I had dreamt that I was going to create a center for health. A center for health where there'd be people exercising and eating right and everything. Well, I mean, really, my whole family, not my whole family, but anybody who was really sick in my family have been able to regain health because of the changes that they've made in their diets. And that's one aspect of it. But also physically, I've been able to come back from being super, super sick and damaged to being pain-free. And strong. And so I think that I've done what I said I wanted to do, although I had no idea how that would play out. Because you have no idea when you dream of something, why it's going to be there. That's an adventure, right? So I had that adventure, and it was because of the self-authoring. And so we're trying to give kids that, because they need a vision too. And that's what we've forgotten, is that we all need a vision. Otherwise, we have nothing to strive towards. And so otherwise, you're like, I guess I can just hang around and look at being peaceful and secure.
Well,
it's
well, and you talked about the dreams of the kids, and then you talked about a little bit of animation. Like, there's cultivating imagination in children, I think, is really important, especially because, like we've talked about with the public school systems and everything, all the systems that we have set up, it's almost, they want to destroy imagination. They want kids to just conform and do what they tell them to do. And imagination is one of the deterrence against authoritarianism. I think the more that you can imagine, the more that you can
and
dream
play
and
out,
envision.
Right?
Yeah.
Play out in pretend play.
Yeah. And so, like I mentioned a couple of times, we're working with Studio on making Tales of the Kingdom, which is a children's fairy tale book, or there's 3 books, but the first one is called Tales of the Kingdom, into an animated children's series.
Yeah.
And is
this going to be drawn animations?
Well,
or live animations?
We're working on the animations right now. The producer is over here.
It's digital. It's digital. It's in a program called Blender.
Yeah, digital.
So it'll be beautifully animated.
Yeah.
And does it look? Oh yeah, so it looks 3-dimensional then?
It's 3-dimensional, but it's not like Pixar. It's a little more artistic than.
We'll show you the style.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that sounds fun, because Jordan's got a fairy tale.
Really? He wrote.
Oh yeah, Water of Life. No, it's a fairy tale. It's like Snow White, but it was never done by Disney.
Really?
Yeah.
He wrote it himself.
No, well, he wrote it, I guess, but it's like a Snow White. It's like a Snow White story. It's a Grimm fairy. It's not a Grimm fairy tale. Might be a Grimm fairy tale. I don't know exactly what fairy tale and where it came from. What was the genesis of this fairy tale? But it's a historical fairy tale that has never been animated, and so he's actually also trying to move that forward. So so you're in the same kind of domain as at least that one project that George
what's
did.
fairy tale? Like why fairy?
Why fairy tales?
Yeah, why fairy tales?
Well, look at Snow White. Snow White in the Disney movie that they made. The Disney character of Snow White ends up leaving the castle with the huntsman who's supposed to take her heart, and that they portray. And then he lets her loose, and she goes into the forest, and she finds the dwarf's house. And she goes there and she falls asleep, right? And when she wakes up, the dwarves have all come home from work, and she's there. And the same thing happens, but they are kind of portrayed as, well, first of all, they're CGI. They're animated characters from CGI. They're not actors, although she is an actor. They're not actors.
They couldn't do...
Because they couldn't use dwarfs. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. First of all, they weren't going to even have dwarfs. Then they decided maybe they could, and then the dwarf actor from Game of Thrones.
I know what you're talking about.
I can't remember his name. Anyway, he said no, the dwarves shouldn't play dwarves. So none of the dwarves got any parts in the movie. So they used CGI, but then their whole idea of dwarves was warped because they created them, and Dopey ends up being misunderstood. He's misunderstood, and he's kind of bashful, even though there's already a bashful in it. And if he would have just had the right attention, you know, he would have been a great dwarf. But they are a portrayal of the common man. And when she comes to the forest and comes into the house and is accepted by the common man, then she serves them. And that is what young women have to learn, is in order to find their prince. And the prince doesn't even come in the Disney movie. There's a band of merry men, and there's one fellow who's the leader, and he befriends Snow White, and he goes to the castle with her, but he's not the prince who saves her. She saves herself. And also Dopey helps to save her because he's the hero of the dwarves. So they mix up, and she doesn't even get married in the end. Whereas in the Grimm's fairy tale, the dwarves save her from the bodice that's too tight, the poison comb, but they can't save her from the apple. So they put her in a glass case. And when the prince comes, he sees beauty, which every man responds to, because men are after what I read. I read a book recently, and I can't remember the name of it, but he says, men are after beauty, adventure, and battle. Those are their three pursuits. And so when the prince happens by and he sees this beautiful princess in the glass case, he has to have her. Yeah. And he takes her with him, but he jostles the case and the apple falls out and she comes back to life and he marries her. And that's the Grimm fairy tale. That's not what they did in Disney. So they aren't staying with Tolkien, the fairy tale. Yeah. So Jordan wants to, and I'm sure you do too, you want to show a fairy tale that has the traditional arc. The story has the traditional arc to inspire children.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
There's these underlying principles that basically through the story. I've listened to Pajot talk about like Jack and the Beanstalk.
Yeah, and he's doing a lot with fairy tales.
Mm-hmm. There's like they're weird when you read them. Some of them, you're just this is weird. And then when you hear somebody explain it to you, you're like, wow, that totally makes sense. And then you start to realize how these stories formed your mind as a child in ways that you had absolutely no idea. Mm-hmm. And if we give the wrong stories, then their minds are going to be formed into the wrong way.
Yeah, if we give feminist stories, well, that's not going to work.
Right.
That's not going to work out well for families. It's not, because they're going to put that in a secondary role to career, and that's backwards. It's just backwards. You know, I had kids not early. I wish I would have had kids earlier, because I was 31 when I had my first baby. And so then by the time I'd had my second baby, that's all the babies I had. And I would have had more babies if I would have started when I was 20. But now both my kids have 3 kids each. So they're doing a better job than we did. So I'm pretty happy with them that they're taking on the responsibility. I'm actually very grateful to them that they're taking on. When my dad died, I had a dream about him, that I dreamt about him when he was a young man, like 19 years old, which you don't know your dad when you're 19. You know your dad when he's 40, because by then you're 10 and you can think about your dad. But I saw him when he was 19, and in my dream, he was trying on different hats. So he was trying on different hats. And then he puts on this hat, and it's a stovepipe, and it goes right over his body, and he can't even move his arms. And I'm watching this, and I'm thinking, and then I think, oh, my dad as a boy has become a man, and he's become a part of society. And so he sacrificed himself to his family. And so I thanked him for being my father. And I thought, wow, that's a cool, it's like a fairy tale, a dream in a way. You know, it's kind of dreamy. And like you said, you don't understand really what it's about, but it informs you. That's what dreams are. There's something that you can't quite put into words. So it shows you pictures of something that you might be able to make sense of. And I seem to be able to, I have lots of dreams, so I can kind of make sense of them. So that was a very good dream. It showed that I had come to a place where I can revere my dad. And that's important. Yeah. That's important for my relationship with my son, and then my son's relationship with his son. Yeah. It's important.
It like puts things into perspective, especially when you're a kid. You don't realize how the sacrifices that your parents are making.
You don't know.
Yeah.
No, you don't know. Like your little guys, they don't know what you have to do and what you've given up in order to be a father. But they will. Hopefully, if they have their own kids. I mean, that's usually when you start to learn about that stuff. Like I've learned more about my childhood and doing this, becoming a dad, then I'm like, oh, wow, that's why my parents did that. That's why my mom and dad taught us these things. It wasn't just for nothing. It was like, I'm going to need that at some point.
And so these fairy tales are basically, it sounds like, I mean, and I think this is true, that these stories are fundamental to child development, because if you sat them down and you just said, you need to learn sacrifice, you need to love your neighbor. I mean, that works, but like they need to see it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Little Elliot, my son's oldest, Julian Say will read him a story, and then he'll put on headphones and a little music box that plays stories, and he'll listen to that story over and over and over and over and over until he knows it. That's how kids learn. And so you make a fairy tale, and if you can put it in an audio form, oh my goodness, because way more people listen than read, way more. And, technology such as it is, I think if you're listening, you can still engage in the world. You can go for walks, you can get your work done. And then when you're with people, you can be without technology and just communicate. And so I think audio is a good medium? Social media medium. Yeah.
We talked about earlier, like approaching God, or I guess approaching the world. There's dangers to the world. And as you're talking now, I was thinking about the Tales of the Kingdom story starts in this like enchanted authoritarian city. And it's like a dangerous place, and people work at night, and the children are like slaves, and they make the power grid work for the city. It's a terrible situation. And the main character, Hero, and his little brother have to escape from Enchanted City into kind of the king's kingdom.
Yeah, the hero journey.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I think is interesting about stories is that it can introduce children to some of those brutalities of the real world without them actually having to experience it, but to see it.
That's a good idea.
And so, I mean, that's like, that seems to be one of the points, or one of the fundamental reasons to read stories to your children, so that they can know, and to watch stories, so that they can know that like there is a way out. Like when you find yourself in the Enchanted City,
they have to listen to stories. It fleshes out strategies for them to deal with trouble, which is definitely coming their way.
Yeah. So this is one of the most important things that you think people
stories?
should be. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. George, he tells, when he lectures about psychology, but also about the Bible, he tells stories. He tells stories because I think he knows those. And also he tells me, in the book that I'm writing, nail everything with a story, because that's what people remember. And also I was going to give a talk, and my priest said, make sure you just tell stories, because that's what they'll remember. Yeah, it's stories. He
talked about in the Maps of Meaning lectures, the Pinocchio story. That was really helpful for me, because we watched Pinocchio, and I don't know how well the adaptation was to the Disney movie, but we watched that a ton when I was a kid, the Disney Pinocchio story, and there are like them turning into asses. That's like one thing as a kid, you're like, oh, that's funny.
Know, yeah.
And then I did not even think twice about it. But then when he started to explain what that actually means, I was like, oh, wow, there's a whole almost theology behind
for sure
these stories.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
And Harry Potter as well.
Yeah.
There's theology behind that. One thing your wife and you could watch is Cabaret. Cabaret was made in the 70s, was it? And it tells what's going on today, because it's about a nightclub, and one of the dancers who's in it for herself, so pretty narcissistic character, who's looking for whatever she can get. And then there's Joel Grey plays the MC, and he has some sort of, it's almost like Cain, who's succumb to the seduction of his evil, of the evil into him, and invited it in, that he is consorting with the Nazis who are in the crowd. And it's this whole play between authoritarianism or whatever.
Authoritarianism. Yeah.
Getting tired. And the sexual depravity.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what's happening again. It just plays over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So it's good to know that we are in a narrative, and that you can choose your narrative, and you better, or it's not your story. It'll be the story, and it won't have anything to do with you individually. Well, that's not good.
Yeah.
There aren't any real, there's no heroes in the stories anymore, or there's no male heroes, right? That's wrong, because they're the heroes. You know, young women say, oh, you can't find any good men anymore. And what do I think about that? I think, well, Snow White, the new Disney movie, I saw that movie.
Did you like it?
No, it wasn't any good. It wasn't any good. They have changed the Grimm's fairy tale. Even the old Disney movie had changed the Grimm's fairy tale, because the Grimm's fairy tale, the prince comes when Snow White is in the glass case. She swallowed the apple. The dwarves can do nothing about it. They've saved her from the poison comb, which is narcissism. They've saved her from the tight bodice, which is accentuated sexuality, which was going to kill the princess, right? And this is the evil queen that is imposing this on Snow White. She imposes this sexuality that will kill her, and narcissism, which will kill her. And that doesn't work because the common man, the dwarves, save her. Wow. Because she has been serving the common man. So they save her.
Right.
And that's how she finds her prince.
Well, there's
so women have to, they may not want to hear this, but women have to serve the common man. Yeah. And society, it's not just women, it's just society, teachers, everyone have to serve the common man in order for the princess to find her prince.
You're saying they shouldn't belittle them and make them effeminate and crush their souls. And I mean, when I was in the public school system as a kid, it felt like every single structure that was set up was trying to basically just destroy my masculinity.
It was.
And
we met a guy in a restaurant. He was serving us. He was probably about 30-ish, I guess. And he said that he started watching Ben Shapiro, and then he came to Jordan. But he said he was hard left. He was radically left. And he had feminized himself as much as he could. And they had parties where all they would do was have competitions on who was more victimized. Wow. It was just like really, but he had this girlfriend who was really devoted to this way of life. And when he found Ben and Jordan, he listened and thought, yeah, this is probably a better way for me to go. And he had to get rid of her and start lifting weights and masculized himself and came back and had a job. So he stopped and told us that. Really? Yeah. No, there's a lot of evil in the education system, and it's very anti-male. And in Adam and Eve, because Eve hearkens to the serpent, and then Adam says it's her fault that they got in that predicament. So they both made a mistake in order to fall, right? And I guess we've been falling ever since. But it really does take respect. You have to adhere to these basic biblical virtues in education and everything, and they haven't. They haven't. They've decided they could do without them. But what has happened? What has happened to that? Boys and men have been vilified. Yeah. They've become the oppressor and the man who's no good for a woman. A woman can't find a man who's any good anymore. And women don't realize they have to serve mankind to find a prince.
What they mean is that they can't find a man who's going to submit to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And it's like, yeah.
But you submit to each other, to the marriage. Yeah. It's not that you're submitting to each other. You're submitting to the greater marriage.
Yeah. Yeah, in the marriage you submit.
But that's not, so it's not submitting, it's not oppressing each other in order to, it's still that victim.
Submission is, I feel like the biblical submission is not an oppressive. It's
not.
It's rooted in serving. Like
yes,
Christ,
in service.
We submit to Christ, and Christ also serves us. He washes the feet of the disciples, but the authoritative structure is still there. It's like Christ didn't lose his authority as the God of the universe when he's washing the feet of his disciples. He's showing us that this is what it means to have authority, to properly exercise authority, is that you serve the people who are beneath you. You don't dominate them. That's how I read it. That's how I understand it.
Yeah.
And it feels like women, I know a lot of, actually it's in my own family.
It's in everybody's family.
Yeah. Where the women they just crush these men, and these men don't feel like they have anybody to look to.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't even know what to do to talk to them. I know that Ben and Jordan have had a massive influence on
influence.
And that's amazing.
But each of us have to do it. It's up to all of us.
Yeah. A lot of young men don't have, I've noticed that a lot of them don't have good fathers.
Yeah.
Themselves.
Or any father.
Or a father.
Well, that doesn't help.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
Like at all.
Right. And so what do you do? I mean, I guess just what would you encourage men into? You just tell them, work out, read your Bible, become a Christian. Like, how would you encourage men and women who are stuck in the idea that...
We had a young woman come we go to a restaurant where they have open windows until it got so hot. Now the windows are closed. But when the windows were open, this young woman walked by and recognized Jordan. And she was probably in her late 20s, I think, probably. And she's very beautiful. And she stopped and she said, "Oh, Dr. Peterson, sorry to bother you. Everyone's always very kind." She said, "I watched your podcast with Joe Rogan where you were talking about narcissists." Yeah. And she said, "I think I've been dating narcissists and I've decided to stop dating them and I'm going back to the church to find a husband." And I said, "Yeah, that's right. That's where you go. Yeah. That's where you go. You got to find somebody who's realizes that there is an authority and it's not another human being."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what is it about? I mean, would you encourage women to forsake their families for the sake of career? Probably not, right?
No. Well, first of all, I think that, a lot of the people who listen to me, I guess, my producer's find out, he's been doing analytics to find out who's been listening. There are women from 18 to 24.
Good.
So that's really good.
Yeah.
From California.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you're like doing the Lord's work. Good.
So that was exciting to hear. But
what is it? You think it's
and mothers. Mothers are listening to me.
And is it probably because you're an older, wiser
grandmotherly
figure?
Yeah.
And not many people have good grandmothers.
Well, maybe there aren't that many grandmothers who are speaking out about what they have realized were their own problems and how they've rectified things. Yeah. And that's what grandmothers are for. They're for, and grandfathers too, is to help to see where the pitfalls are, if you can avoid them. Do
you know, I know he's been looking into the analytics, but do you know, what the particular things that these young women are mostly interested in and what they've...
Faith, health, family.
Okay. Well, that's good. I mean, that's at least encouraging.
It is.
'Cause I've got a lot of male friends who say the same thing. I can't find a woman to marry. And so everybody's saying it, like the women are saying they can't find a man, and the man saying that they can't find a woman, but and I don't know.
We have to start putting together, Peterson Academy is going to hold a cruise. Yeah. And
a cruise.
And we're going to bring some professors on the cruise and have courses, but it'll be a place for people to meet one another. Because that's, if you look at the essence of university, as long as they're not indoctrinating them in terrible ways, what they're doing is they're allowing people of similar ages to meet one another when they're still young. Yeah. Yeah. But I think, women also, we don't like to talk about this, but young women become women when they're about 14 or 15 years old, and then they're looking for a husband. Yeah. And it's like an unsaid secret. It's a secret that we keep from young women, that is what they're ready for.
That's natural.
Is they're finding a husband. Yeah. And so if what they're after isn't a husband, then they shouldn't be going down that direction. Yeah. That makes sense. So I think that's something that I'd like to have women investigate, is whether that impulse is true to them or not.
Do you see a problem with this? And I see it a lot on social media. My wife and I talk about it a lot with it happens with younger men too. We're talking about women right now. So younger women trying to, I see this all the time, tell other women how to live and how to act. Like there's all of these like influencer channels.
Oh yeah,
and
I've
they're
been
like
looking at
25.
TikTok. Oh yeah, see,
it's
that's
like,
the
what do
other
you
thing
have to
I looked
say?
at for this social media talk was TikTok, and I said, who are the most prominent creators? Geez, you know, the most prominent creators come from gender focused conversations. And TikTok, because it has so much interaction and video and everything, that's where the girls go. Because YouTube is a little more, there's not as much interaction, and X is very text heavy. And so they go to what is most, I think, most relational. Because women are very relational. They want a relationship. That's what they want. They want a relationship because it's going to lead to a baby, obviously. So biologically, that's who they are, and that's what drives them if they're truthful to themselves. But, you know, feminism has done a virtually abysmal job of preparing young women. They've taken them in the completely, in a terrible direction that's destructive. It isn't even just not helpful, it's destructive. And this, I mean, who was writing about feminism back when it began? It definitely wasn't a woman who was married and had lots of children,
And had a healthy
because she wouldn't have had time.
Right.
Right. So it was women who were in the upper class, who probably were in a situation where they had time to think about themselves. And as people are, we have a tendency to feel bad for ourselves because we don't have the life that we wished we had, even though we haven't done any work to go in that direction. And so then they wrote about it. And those are the mothers of feminism.
So you multiply that by like 50 million now with social media.
Yeah.
I mean, because all of these young women go on social media and lecture everybody on how to be a mom and a whatever.
Yeah.
Or not even how to be a mom, just how to be a woman. And they're 25 and they don't even know what a woman is. So I find that problematic, and
well, you have to live your life and get involved, and then you learn what it is, you know. And that's what my sister told me. She was older than me, and she said they already had children when I had my first baby, and she said, you know, you're going to realize that you're part of a society that you didn't know was there when you become a parent. And it was true, because once my baby was born and Jordan and I went out to breakfast in this Quebec, in this Montreal diner that we'd been going to, then people who had never noticed us before turned around and went, coochie, coochie, coo.
Oh, yeah.
Baby.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
walking across the street in Montreal and having older women stop and look in the carriage to see what was there. And so all these interactions started to happen. I realized that I was now a part of a club that I never knew existed before. And these young women who don't have a husband and aren't having any kids, they don't know that other part of that beautiful, inclusive club is there that encapsulates everyone who has a family, all right up to grandparents. Yeah. They're all part of that. So you weave yourself into society that way. If you don't, you stay separate. Well, that's isolating. So even if you weren't on social media, you would be isolated. If you don't get married and have kids, in some manner, you'll be isolated. Because even the people at work, most of them will have families. And, well, at least used to, most of them would have families. Now maybe you'll have individual people who don't have any families that they're responsible to. But then it's not a natural relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems to be like, I mean, one of the main problems with modernity is that you can not only not have kids and not get married, you can also just move 1,000 miles away from your family and not have to deal with your own family. So it's like individualism on steroids, and people are living in cities with no family, no one that actually cares about them. And they're trying to like create supplements for that through friend groups or things like that. I mean, millennials do this all the time. They think that like the Friendsgiving, I hate Friendsgiving. I know people
I've never heard of that.
It's like Thanksgiving with your friends.
Oh, okay.
It's like defeats the whole purpose of Thanksgiving is like getting together with your family and the intergenerational thing and, seeing relatives that you haven't seen in a while. It's all been replaced with, I'm just going to hang out with my friends because that's what life's all about. So you got like 35-year-olds doing Friendsgiving. And I just think it's not very helpful. I think it's not very good for people to just abandon their families. And it seems like it's having really negative effects. And I'm seeing it. I mean, I'm in Madison, Wisconsin, very, very progressive. It feels like that's everybody. And it feels like the church doesn't want to talk about that sometimes, because if you were to tell people that they need to go back and live with their families, you're going to like lose congregants and you're going to lose people. And that would be the greater good. But it's not good for the individual church. So they don't want to do that because they want to keep the people coming to their own church. I don't know.
It's up to each individual and their family to decide what they're going to do. Yeah. And so it takes some deep and nuanced conversations to delve into what it means to be responsible to their families.
Yeah. Well,
maybe it's a summer vacation with everybody, like a family, and maybe it's also a winter vacation with everyone, at least twice a year, so all the cousins get to know one another, right? And with my family, we always had, every 2 years, we had a summer family on my dad's side, family reunion on my dad's side. We didn't have that on my mother's side, but from the time I was a baby, I knew who my grandmother's siblings were, who would come for that family reunion. And now it's to the point where our family are big enough and the old fellows are all gone that we're starting the family reunions, and they see the necessity of it. Oh, when are we going to meet in the summer? And my sister has a week in July. That's when my family gets together. And so everybody's doing the same thing. Yeah. These traditions are good to carry on.
Yeah. Family reunions and things like that.
Yeah. Well, then you can kind of keep an eye on one another, because, maybe somebody isn't doing so good. And if you see them and then you see them again, it's like, what happened this year? And so you need someone to ask that question. Right. Because you can't, in your head, you can't figure out your life. You have to share with someone else to really see the reality. I mean, even that story I told you this morning about Jordan and I, it's a behavior that he's had for his whole life. And I've had similar, behaviors that I've reflected on and deal with. But we have to share that, or he wouldn't have figured that out on his own. It had to be in a relationship to me. So we have to be together one another so that we can find out where we fall short, and where we can and to realign. Yeah.
Well, that realignment. I mean, there's the way. I mean, we've been talking a lot about like the personal responsibility towards the realignment.
Yeah.
But then there's also sort of the external
forces.
External forces, or even, the book that you told me, The Way of Beauty.
Yeah.
So there's all this conversation about art, architecture, like when you walk into a space, what is it doing to you? What is it doing to your soul?
Right.
And that also has an effect on aligning you with the truth. It's not, so there's things that impose upon you that should be imposing upon you for what's good. And then things that are, personal responsibility that come from within. Like when we go to the humanities school at the University of Wisconsin, it's like concrete, brutalist. It's the most depressing place you could possibly imagine. And that seems like that's where humanism ends, is that sort of thing.
Actually, you know where it ends? In complete fracturing.
Yeah.
Because that's where modern art ended up, where the human form, Gauguin in his time, he went to the West Indies. So he was more of a naturalist, that people were in nature, they were perfect and all that. So he goes to the West Indies and he paints everybody, but he paints the colors even within the human being so that they are part of nature. They're not separate from nature. So he's mixing those two ideas and trying to make them, there's no boundaries there. Yeah. Right? There's no boundaries there. And then further than that, then there's Picasso and Cézanne, where they were fracturing the environment and then fracturing the actual human form so that it was all in geometry, but not perfect geometry, also twisted and made bigger and smaller in different ways. And so then when you look at it, and eventually it was, he shows this one, and it might have been Jackson Pollock. I think it was probably Jackson Pollock, where he hung paint cans with a hole in them. And then he had a scaffolding at the top that I guess moved somehow. And so then the paint cans moved, and the paint that fell, that he's showing the randomization of life, like that there is no order, that there's no direction, that it all comes from a randomness. And then this John Cage, have you ever looked at him? Oh my goodness. So he, and it must have been very interesting for these artists, because they would get this feeling that they had to express this stuff that was just the most bizarre stuff. So they show him one time, he's outside and there's this people all sitting around this grand piano, and he sits down to the piano and he puts on a metronome and he closes the piano. Tick, 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 tick. Then he opens the piano and he bows to everyone and he walks away. Wow. And so there's nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
Well, isn't that sort of with Jackson Pollock? So, okay, his splatter paint, I don't even like to use the word painting or anything, because it's not art. I could do it, but I wouldn't make as much money. But that's coming from somewhere in these artists, right? That's coming from their philosophy. That's coming from their worldview. That's Schaeffer's argument, right? Like your worldview affects everything that you do. That's coming from something.
If you aren't moored in something to give you the discernment about what is a good idea and what's a bad idea, then it's going to devolve and it's going to completely fracture. And so now people are actually changing their bodies. Like we are actually fractionating now in real lifetime. In
a million ways. It's not just the transgender thing. It's also like what we eat and how we live and like not working out. I mean, we're fracturing our bodies.
Did I tell you my theory of that if we don't eat any processed foods, I guess we're getting to that point now. Say we just don't eat any processed foods. So we're not eating the million kinds of sugar that you can make from a plant. If we're not eating all of that, if we're mostly eating a good protein, have a good protein and fat diet with the odd whole vegetable and fruit, that we will come closer to God, because we won't be so foggy and we'll be able to discern our own conscience and calling, and we'll find our calling.
That doesn't seem like that seems like a fact to me.
Don't you think that's a fact?
I can't imagine how it wouldn't be. I mean, if God created the earth and created all of these different plants and animals and things for us to eat, it would seem to me that if we eat in accordance with nature and in accordance with his ordered will, that we would come in close communion with him. And it's a embodied
everyone
experience.
I've brought this up to.
Yeah.
And no matter what kind of conversation I've had, they've all agreed with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I've had people who've gone on this very strict carnivore diet who have come to God during that time.
That would make sense.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
That's the case.
Okay. I heard at some point that you added cheese to your...
No.
You didn't?
No.
Is that a fake news?
That's definitely fake news. And I'm not a foster mother either, and never have been.
Did somebody say that?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're still just doing the carnivore. You haven't added anything to the mix.
I drink a little bit of coffee.
Oh, why?
Oh, it's good.
Yeah. Okay. I understand that.
An espresso.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Yes.
So an espresso, one in the morning. I seem to be able to tolerate that. And bacon.
Oh, really?
And fish.
Okay.
But it's still all meat.
All meat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's still all meat. And I've tried to eat. I'm more resilient than some of the members of my family, so I can try things and see how they go. But just sugar, honey, even doesn't really. It's probably not good for me. It's probably not good for me. It makes you crave sugar. Yeah. And when you crave sugar, that's a goal that's not directed as to the best thing, right? It's directed at satiation at a low level. Yeah, well, that's probably not healthy.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah. It's hard though, because cookies and everything, they taste very good.
Hard.
They taste good.
They're very good.
But sin feels good,
yes,
right? In
that's
the
why
moment.
I said it's simple.
Yeah.
It's simple. It's gratifying. It's quick.
Yep.
It's,
I got to think about that, because we eat cookies at night sometimes. And we every time we're like, we shouldn't be doing this, but we're going to do it.
My mom told me eventually I was too old for cookies.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't know if you could ever get too old for cookies. So,
No, I told her, yeah, I probably was.
Okay, so I want to talk about the art thing, because I remember watching a documentary about you and Jordan and sort of this rise. I mean, it's been like 10 years since that first video came out.
Yeah, and we thought it would be a week.
Okay, so let's talk about that first. Like, what's that like?
It's just a week.
You're like 10 years into this. Is it, did you ever think that your life was going to be like this at all?
No, not at all. But I think this is a good calling. It feels like the right thing to try to help people to come to have a better life and to steer the world in a, when Schaefer made that film, there was no influx of immigrants into the UK and into United States and into Canada. Islam didn't have as huge a force as it does now. I don't know what he would say about that, because that wasn't part of his film. But it might be the wake-up call we need.
I hope so.
Well, it might be. So we could be grateful to them, because it might be with the wake-up call we need.
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, it's hard to say right now with all this. I mean, if you say anti-Semitism, people get mad at you, but there's a lot of anti-Semitism, a lot of Jew hatred, and there's support on the political right for Hamas, for terrorist organizations and groups. And I just think that's crazy. I don't know where that...
And on the left too.
Well, that's a given.
That goes without saying.
Yeah, you don't even need to say that.
There's going to be extremism on both ends of it. So the right like to think that they're all good, but they have their extremists as well. Yeah, and it's good to admit that. That's a good thing to admit.
But it seems like the horseshoe effect, like the people on the right, they were against the people on the left, and now it feels like they're coming together in this anti-Jewish hatred.
Yeah. Oh dear, right?
So maybe they were just both liberals to begin with and never actually conservative. That's what I think. Well,
I think maybe secularism is more at the bottom of that.
Yeah. Well, when I say liberalism, I mean like negative liberty, like they believe that that human beings, to live a fulfilled life is to have no restraint, is to have no, the responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah. That's definitely a secular idea.
And one of the main things that you find at the bottom of that is that you just have to blame somebody else for all of your problems. Yeah. And it's easy to just take a look at the Jews and be like, well, Andrew Klavan made a good point about this at one point. He was like, when you look at the Jews, you see a remnant of Christ, not because of their morality, but because of their ethnicity. Jesus was a Jew. And so one of the reasons for all of the Jew hatred is just the fact that they share the same ethnicity as God, as Christ. And
they're a minority.
That's true.
But they're successful minority.
They are. Yeah.
So are they an oppressed minority or are they oppressors? So they're in a category also that's difficult to define. Mm-hmm. And so that makes them stand out.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is a problem, to stand out.
And the individualist Western mindset, I've had conversations with friends about this very issue. They really can't handle the fact that the Jews were the chosen people. They're like, well, why would God choose them and not me? Because we've grown up in a culture in which everything revolves around the self, the individual. And so I've talked to young people and they just can't wrap their head around the fact that the Jews are the chosen people of God, and that we don't really know all the details to why God chose them, but that it's something that we need to submit to, be obedient to in the scriptures. And they can't handle that because God didn't choose them.
I don't know what to say about that.
I just think it's just something interesting.
Yes, it's very interesting. It's very interesting that, it was the Greeks and the Romans and the Jews. So it was the Jews that separated from Caesar, separated from the emperor, right? And so it was the Jews at the beginning it was the Christians. It was the Christians, because there was an understanding, right, that the Jews could have their synagogues within the Roman Empire, but then the Christians separated from the Jews and became rebels. And the establishment noticed that. And so as long as you weren't as long as you weren't poking the establishment, the Russian establishment, that you were okay in the synagogues, they managed to do that. Right? They managed to do that. But the Christians, They didn't manage to do that.
Yeah.
They separated themselves and made everybody aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that became a sore on the side of the Romans, who were already starting to fall apart.
Yeah.
And so they were having to have an authority over things, and the Christians wouldn't pay any attention to their authority. So it's interesting that the Christians came from the Jews. The Jews were accepted. And now, years and years and years later, we hearken back to the Jews. Mm-hmm. And Christianity isn't as outwardly, well, maybe it is, but it's not being reported in the same sort of story as the anti-Semitism. But there is plenty of Christian murder going on in the world for some reason.
Yeah. Well, beauty, art, and truth are fundamental to pursuing a flourishing life and raising children. That's why I've been working with Rocket Sled Studios for the past couple of years to create a brand new children's animated series based on the beloved Tales of the Kingdom fairy tales by David and Karen Maines. The series explores themes of good and evil, love and sacrifice, virtue and vice, and is aimed at showing children the truth of the gospel through story. We've already completed the concept art, and we are currently working on the first bit of animation that should be finished soon. So go to www.rocketsledstudios.org and sign up for our newsletter to stay in the loop on the Tales of the Kingdom children's series. Because
nobody's talking about that.
Well, because Christians are correct. We know the truth. And people who want to destroy the truth are going to want to kill the Christians. That's how it's been from the beginning. I mean, that was the Roman Empire sends
So it's not just the Jews.
No, I think that all of the Jew hatred is misplaced. I mean, obviously, any hatred is misplaced. We know that. But like Christians have always been the ones that have been persecuted the most out of anybody over the last 2,000 years.
Oh, yeah?
I think, right? I mean, the Jews,
I don't know.
It's the Jews have had a lot of struggles, but
Yes.
Christians were slaughtered in the beginning in the Colosseum. There's been, Christians have been killed on multiple occasions. Maybe it's the Jews. It's a close one, but the Christians are correct, but it's not, you can't define it as clearly, I don't think, because Christians are of all race, of all creeds. So there's not an ethnicity attached to it.
Right.
So it's easy to look at, it's simple to look at the Jews and say, it's the skin, it's the ethnicity, it's where they live. We know exactly where they are. We can just blame that. That's just a simple way of looking at it. It's difficult for Christians. With Christians, I just think because we're all over the place.
Although they are being persecuted, it's not publicized the same way,
right? Because
it's hard to define.
Well, and because why would you publicize that? The goal, again, maybe we're getting conspiracies here, but I think the goal of the media is to shut down the Christians because they're correct. And the one thing that has always stood in between authoritarianism and like a free society are the Christians. Like the Christians are the ones who.
It's either Christianity
or authoritarianism.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not either Judaism or authoritarianism. It's either Christianity or authoritarianism. That's what I've noticed historically.
I agree with that, but I don't know if everybody does.
They don't have to. They're wrong if they don't agree with it. But I think that's the problem. And behind a lot of the hatred is, I think there is just a deeper hatred for the Christians. And I just think it's harder to pin down the Christian, which is our stealthy advantage, that we're all over the place. And when you try to kill us in one area, we'll rise up in another area, and it doesn't really matter. That's just been 2,000 years of that. And you're not going to stop the Christians. And that's just a fact. And so what's closest? I mean, Paul talks about it in Romans that the relationship between the Christians and the Jews is a complicated one because God is using the Gentiles to win the Jews back to him. And so God loves the Jews. He wants them, that's his chosen people still. Some people have weird eschatologies, and I don't agree with their eschatology, who think that the Jews don't matter anymore. No, they still do. And so our relationship to them is that we want to evangelize them, we want to love them. But then Paul also says that they're our friends and our enemies, and that we don't agree. Like their rejection of Christ is a problem, but also they are the chosen people of God. That complexity, that difficult theological tension, a lot of Christians don't want to deal with. So I've noticed that a lot of Christians have just ignored that altogether and have fallen into the camp of, well, it's easy to just blame the Jews. I'm a Westerner. The Jews are chosen by God. I wanted to be chosen by God. This should be about me. And I'm an individualistic person. And so I think that's how you get somebody like Candace Owens. And I think that's how you get somebody like sometimes Tucker Carlson, who claim to be Christians and they can't see the complexities of the theological principles surrounding the relationship that Christians have to Jews.
Well, I don't know about Tucker, but I think that...
And I like Tucker. Like I
like
watch him.
Tucker too.
Yeah.
I don't know about Tucker, but I haven't really even met Tucker Carlson. Not really. Jordan's seen him a lot. I may have met him once or twice, but not really where we were really talking. And Candace Owens, I haven't met that many times, but I did meet her one time. She came as a guest onto the stage long time ago when Jordan and I were, was I on stage? No, I think I was sitting in the audience. So it was right at the beginning of when he went on tour, when I was doing logistics, making sure he got to all of his gigs. And I met her in the green room because she arrived and she was in the green room. She was very nice. She was very nice, engaging individual, quite young. When I first met her.
It's like 10 years ago or so? Or
yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Probably maybe 2017, something like that. Anyway, Jordan invited her to go on stage to say hello to everybody. And she stayed on stage for probably 10 minutes talking. And Jordan watched her and thought, I see how it is. It's about Candace.
Amen. I
and it
agree
was
with
the
that.
first. It was just the first meeting that we had, and it was the first. Sometimes you meet somebody and something happens, and you think, "Oh, is that
it could be a
like
fluke.
That might be nothing, but
Yep.
Is it something?"
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that it's probably something. Yeah. But so that's all really I have, because I know that she's talked. On X about Michaela and about Jordan and, hoping to get clicks. Yeah, well, I don't think that'll last long. No. I'm afraid, because you can't be looking for something instrumental and have it turn out well. Yeah. It just doesn't turn out well.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I do. So, okay, we started this. I want to get into so you have, in that documentary I watched about your family. Yeah. And about sort of the rise where you're at now. You went through your house, and in your house there was art all over the place, like everywhere. And it was sort of like, whoa, there's art everywhere.
No kidding.
And so
no kidding.
what, I'm sure you and Jordan have had conversations about like what art or what sort of art have you put in your life and that has imposed itself upon you, and why have you chosen that?
Well, Jordan was always interested in the Soviet Union and what went on there. And then he started reading about art and the change of art from religious art or propaganda to fine art. And so it was it's probably be 20 years now, or maybe 25 years. I'm not quite sure how long it was. He said, oh, well, maybe all that propaganda in the Soviet Union now will be considered fine art. So he started looking on eBay to see if he could find any remnant of Soviet inspired art, propaganda. Yeah. And so then he would find paintings, usually from junk dealers. So he'd find in the Ukraine often, and he would show them. And so then he'd print them out and he'd put them on the carpet. Maybe he'd have 20 pictures, and I'd go through them and I'd say, no, and would get down to maybe 4 of them. And I'd say, yeah, those ones are pretty good. So then he'd buy them. And so we would do that. He had a lot of patience to scroll through hundreds of terrible pieces of art and find ones. While his eye was educated, he'd find ones, often people will take a picture of something and it'll be all foreshortened and the color isn't very good. And so he learned how to put them in Photoshop and to make them square and to normalize all the colors and say, hey, you know what? That looks like an oil painting. What do you think? Yeah. And so we would look at them and decide whether
these were
sometimes they were torn because they were cut.
Yeah.
Because they sometimes cut in the canvases from the public buildings. when the Berlin Wall fell.
Yeah.
There was, a lot of
So these are
destruction.
propaganda pieces.
Yeah.
So in the story that we're working on, the children's animated series, there's sort of the Enchanted City is what it's called. There's sort of an authoritarian figure running the Enchanted City, and there's a lot of propaganda. Death to pretenders. There is no real king. Death to pretenders. What did you notice in the Russian or Soviet propaganda? Like, did you notice any themes or things that you thought were very deceptive ways of portraying truth?
Well, they had these, they would show, some of them were of, say, farmers. And so they would show maybe young women in a kerchief standing with maybe a yellow skirt and a blue spotted shirt, and she would be standing out in front and the fields would be behind, and she'd be all patriotic. It was a patriotic display of their farming industry, or it would be a patriotic display of industry. So then maybe there would be some sort of factory of some sort. And so all we were doing at that time was modern art. So all of the portrayal of our history and our industry, there is none.
Yeah.
There is none, because we didn't do any of that. Whereas the Soviet, they had a fine art industry,
right?
And they used it. And some of these paintings were good paintings. Not all of them were good paintings, but some of them were beautiful paintings.
This is Did you and Jordan watch Severance, the TV show on Apple?
No, not yet.
Okay, you need to watch that, because this is helping me connect some of the dots. There's this authoritarian weird company that's doing all this weird stuff, and you don't really know what's going on. But one of the departments within the company is called optics and design, and they make these propagandistic paintings. And it sounds exactly like what you're saying, to sort of make everybody like have all this like religious reverence for the CEO of the company. It's very interesting. I was going to ask you if you had seen that. You should watch that. I think you guys would really like it.
Oh yeah, we had a couple of pictures of Lenin. Lenin in his study with a table done in quite soft colors with other people sitting at the table. Then we had another one of him and looking very large and very strong. And it was mostly a portrait, that one, in a dark night with, you could see that there's war going on, and he's standing out in front, very strong and authoritarian. And then there was another one of a really good one of revolutionaries, a woman, and maybe there were 4 figures, young people, maybe 1 or 2 women and a couple of men, standing on a cliff, and that they're going to be executed. So there's executioners around in there. They're standing. And so there's a lot of, but some of them are beautifully done paintings. And so I chose, and some of them are just agricultural scenes with nobody in them, just looking at the combines and the rows and rows of wheat with the mountains in the distance, and like beautiful scenes like that. Or a milkmaid, in like pinks and greens and baby blue, and beautiful, with a milkmaid and a couple of animals, and someone milking a cow and stuff. And it's just it's a scene, a pastoral scene that actually my son, I think, has hanging in his cafe in Toronto, because my children liked some of the paintings, but they don't have the ones of the soldiers on a cart with big wheels, dying out and being brought back from the front, with rows and rows and rows of soldiers walking in the distance. So we have those ones too. Or we had on the ceiling of our entrance to our house the destruction of this Crystal Palace where all the Ukrainians were killed. We have that one, but it's like on the ceiling. Those paintings aren't there anymore. I renovated the house again, and I put all those paintings in storage.
Really?
And I brought back, I had them up for 20 years.
Yeah.
I decided that was enough. And so I put them in storage, and I brought back all the paintings that had uplifting messages.
Yeah.
And so now our house is just full of that, and also Indigenous art, because you can see here we have some Indigenous art. That carver is from Vancouver Island, and we've been, he asked us to become part of his family, and so we have been in support of his carving industry. And, and he couldn't carve. He always had to go out and fish. He had to make ends meet, and now we support him, and he carves and he raises his kids. But brutal, we talk about reconciliation, and that's all good and fine. You talk about reconciliation, we'll just give them money and, we'll have done our part. But we are actually part of this family. And his wife died. And then within a month, his house burned down. And all the carvings that he'd made for us in his workshop were all gone. Everything burnt.
Wow.
And
recently?
Oh, no, in the last 5 years. And so then he had 3 little kids that were under 5.
Yeah.
And he's the same age as me. So he's not a young man. And so then he was taking care of these little kids. And then his daughter came home to live with them, and she had 2 little kids. And her boyfriend was in prison, and her boyfriend got out of prison, and he was a drug addict, and she died. And so now he's got 5 little kids. And he also has older children from when he was married first. And so one of them came home to help take care of this brood of kids. But it's an ongoing catastrophe that we are doing our best to be a part of and supportive. But I couldn't do this for another family. I can kind of do this for one family, and we can barely do it. It's overwhelming, the amount of trouble that there is. And we think that all we have to do is give their society some money, and we've done our part. And then we can say, we've reconciled with the trouble of the past. It's no, actually, you have to take responsibility for it. It's brutal, but you have to take responsibility.
That's what Schaeffer says at the end of his book. He talks about what happens to these cultures as they devolve into having two values: personal peace and affluence. That's the only things that they care about. So money, affluence, whatever. Personal peace, more like individualism, stay away from me. And then that probably becomes, like you're saying, our method of quote being generous or whatever, giving people, just give them money and then they'll sort of, and that's what you see politically all over with left-wing policy. It's well, if we just give people money, then we're just solving the problem, and it's not.
Yeah, but you know what happens, because in Canada, Trudeau and now Carney are putting policies in place to give people money for, compensation for whatever. But who pays for that? The taxpayers pay for it. It's not, you can't give our money. Right. Oh yeah, you can. You can give our money, and we'll continue to pay more and more and more taxes.
Yep. It never stops too. And it also abstracts too much, because one of the principles of generosity is the interpersonal relationship. Yeah. And so you don't
that's what the church used to be too, right? You would go to church once a week and you'd see the families who were coming and what kind of troubles they might be involved in. And you would ask what's wrong and see what you could do. Yeah. Yeah. But that's subsidiarity,
the principle
right?
of subsidiarity. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's when you get down to a place where you can actually be effective. Because you can't, if you're top down and you're trying to take control of everything, it's much too big and unwieldy. You can't do anything that's effective. You have to, this is what this ARC idea is, this conference that Jordan has. We've had, I think, 2 now, large ones, but there's been some smaller ones in Australia and Germany. I think South America wants to have one, and I think United States is going to have one. Really? So they're going to be more nationally. We're trying to figure out right now how we can do that, because it has to come down to the local level, because that's where the change has to be made. If it's made top down, then people can decide to opt out. Yeah. And we are deciding to opt out, and that means that people are left bereft of meaning. Yeah, yeah. And so basically the goal of the ARC is Alliance for Responsible Citizenship is to basically reintroduce the principle of subsidiarity and help people to take responsibility for their own life. Yeah. Yeah.
Which sounds it sounds like it's
Common
funny.
sense.
It
It's
does.
just common sense. Why should we listen to Jordan? Because he just talks about things people already know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I always think it's funny because I grew up Christian, but there were two people who affected me mostly over the past 5 years of my life that were not Christian, Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson, who told me, well, I don't know if Jordan's a Christian. It seems like every time that question comes.
He's a Christian. He's a
You
Christian.
think
for
so?
Sure. Well, he's baptized.
Is he really?
I mean, what do you have to do to become a Christian? You have to get baptized, don't you?
Well, then, okay. So then why does he get, what happens when people say, are you?
He doesn't respond to them because it's not the right question.
Okay. All right.
It's
Well,
not
I
the
believe
right
you.
question.
You're his wife. Okay. But they were the ones to say, go and get married and take responsibility for your life, and not the pastors. I didn't hear that in church. It was sort of like there was a lot of confusion over the past 20 years as to, well, what is the church anymore? And what is Christianity?
It stopped reading scripture.
Yeah.
Because really it should just be scripture.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because what other authority do we want to answer to? That's the authority we want.
Yeah.
That's the authority we need. And that's the authority that works.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, I want to end then with this question of moving into the future, I guess, asking you about maybe the next 5-10 years and what you see as, well, a couple things. Like, where do you think things are going culturally? Do you think we're going in a better direction right now culturally as it relates to taking personal responsibility and things like that? Or, and then after you answer that question, tell me what you would encourage, especially young people, to do. I know we've talked a lot about what you'd encourage them to do, but like, what are you seeing going forward?
Well, I do see that in France, there's more people going back to faith. Yeah, because we were supposed to be in Europe May and June, and we've rescheduled it for January to March. So we're not there. So I'm kind of paying attention to what's going on there because I was supposed to be there by now. But it looks like there's some turning towards faith again. So that's hopeful. I'm hopeful. But this whole immigration and this difficulty that we have with radical Islam is a call to action. I think it's a call to action. It's hard to say exactly how that's going to go because it has to come from the Middle East. The direction has to come from within the Arab world about what we're going to do and how we're going to put boundaries around the people who are using the faith to wreak havoc. So there's that, and that is really obvious now in the UK. You know, it's obvious in France and Germany, and it's obvious in Canada. And things, I don't know how they're going in the States now because we have a new administration. And so there's talk of taking action on the people who didn't come here with proper immigration. So I guess we'll see how that goes. I hope that it is. I hope that the authority comes from deep reflection and not power and affluence, like you said, not depravity. That I hope it not power. I hope it comes from something more basic to what is good.
Mm-hmm. The book by David Clayton, The Way of Beauty.
The Way of Beauty.
He talks about this specifically related to Islam. He was like, secularism, like you say, kind of fractures and dies at some point, but something's going to take its place.
Yeah.
And it seems like Islam is going to take its place right now because they're having children, their population is growing, and Christians aren't doing that as much in the West.
That's right.
That's kind of a scary thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's an unnecessary thought too. You know, we have perfectly fine young people that have the responsibility to get married and have kids. So we have to call them. And the thing is, you know, when you have children, as you know, it calls you to be grown up and responsible and to look to the future as something that you would want for your little ones. And unless you have put yourself and unless you've sacrificed your young career individualized ambitions, unless you have sacrificed that to marriage and to a place of service within your family and your communities, we won't see our society prosper. We won't.
Spiritually prosper, right?
Spiritually and with children.
Yeah.
It has to the thing is, people have to have a properly guided, upward focused, so that you're looking to what is best in the marriage and to serving that. And you go to church to get married so that you know who you're serving. You're serving God in all of your interactions together and all of your endeavors to be inspired by what's best. And that's the only way. And you can only go one step at a time. You can really only go one step at a time, because you have to wait. You have to wait for the word of the Lord. Well, that means that you can't rush ahead, like without your
instant gratification goes out the window.
Yeah. And also like running ahead without thinking about it. So you have to be mindful. You have to be patient. And then you have to take a step with confidence that this is the right way to go, but then reevaluate after that step and take another step, so that you say you have a goal in the future that you want to get at, but then you look around to see, where does it look like there's a path? And you go down that path. Well, you're going to hit an obstacle. Well, how prepared are you to hit obstacles? Because you want to see what that obstacle is and what the options are to deal with it. And the way around, where's the path? And look again, where's the path? What is this obstacle, and what will bring the best path forward? And so that's how you end up negotiating.
It sounds like it's a risky business. It's risky. I mean, it
is risky. It's not, but it isn't a place of safety.
Yeah.
That isn't what it is.
When you were talking, there's a painting that I was thinking of, Caravaggio's The Calling of St. Matthew. It's like one of my favorite paintings. And have you seen it? Maybe.
I can't bring it to mind.
So Matthew is a tax collector. He's sitting at this table. There's two people next to him, and Jesus is like pointing at him, calling, this is the calling of, you're going to come and follow me. And so Jesus is pointing at him, and you've got one of his tax collector friends leaning towards Christ and the other one leaning away from Christ. So this is the option that he has. You can either go with him or go away from him, and you have the money. And so like, there's that there too. And then St. Matthew's like, look like me, like, he's like, you're calling me.
Yeah.
And I always love that painting because it shows the options, and it reminds me of the risky reality of the gospel, that like when you choose to follow Christ, you purposefully take a risky path. You're not going to do an easy. It's an adventure. And that's just, I don't know. I mean, my life has been a little bit all over the place because my parents have taken that risk, and now my wife and I are taking that risk with having kids, and half the time maybe not having enough money or having to work weird jobs and just figure it out. And I don't know, like in it, there's stress in it sometimes, but I just feel like it's a weird paradox, because you would think, if you were thinking rationally, that going in the direction of risk and going in the direction of adventure would not be the right way to go. Why don't you just build a safe house, live in it, have all the money,
well, if you're 90, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe not though.
But maybe not too.
Right. And
so is that all you want to do? You just want to like be comfortable? That's Moses. Moses was comfortable, and look what happened to him. So get ready. Whether you want to or not, it's going to come knocking. So
Abraham.
Get ready.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's really good. I do feel like that's encouraging. And it's encouraging to me because Andrew and I have had a rough year, and it's been all bumpy and all over the place. And we've got 2 kids and a third one on the way. And the only thing that we've been able to rely on, I mean, other than family, is just our faith that Christ is like, it's the calling of St. Matthew. It's just like, no, I've called you, and you're going to follow me, and I'm not going to tell you exactly where we're going to go, but it's going to be interesting at the very least.
Isn't it interesting?
Yeah. And it's going to be fulfilling, because I see friends
and your kids are going to learn from it.
Yeah.
You asked about what kids do. You show them the way. That's what you do. I didn't know what I was doing when I had kids. I wanted to fix my houses. I fixed my houses. Good Lord. Now my son, I don't know how many places he's renovated and made better, and my daughter too. And I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't expect, I didn't, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Yeah. But so whatever it is you're doing, they are watching. Yeah. They are learning. They are going to use that knowledge to become who they're going to be and then beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's fulfilling.
And so you want to go in the direction where you're going to be learning the most you can because they're going to learn from it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Amen. I like that. That's encouraging. And it makes, and I think it's encouraging in a world that's been, like you said, kind of flirting with authoritarianism, with the false god of security, and to take the risk to follow Christ, to not exactly know where you're going to go, and to bring a family along, and to see your kids kind of develop. And I haven't seen it fully.
Don't they light up though when there's adventures?
Yeah, they do.
Well,
yeah, it's really fun. I love it. It's fun. My wife is more risk averse, but we have, it's a fun game.
You have to have her to make sure that there isn't a cliff right here.
Yeah.
But
she's stopped me from going over the cliff a couple times, but it's very, I totally agree. And I think, so the takeaway for me is like, have kids and trust in the gospel and follow Christ, right?
Yeah.
To where he's leading you.
And also maintain your marriage by honoring your commitment and loving your wife. Yeah.
Great. Tammy, thanks for doing this podcast. This
You're
was
welcome.
very good. Yeah.
Oh, so nice of you to come.
Yeah.